Well, one of the new seven wonders of the world could be losing its title. Machu Picchu, of course, located in Peru, was named one of the new wonders of the world.
The request came in quietly but spread like wildfire once the details emerged.
Grok
AI, already recognized as a frontier-shifting system in artificial intelligence, was asked to reconstruct Machu Picchu, not merely as an architectural rendering, not simply as a collection of stones arranged into terraces and temples, but as a fully living, breathing environment reconstructed from every possible dataset, sensor feed, historical record, and archaeological insight available. The task was monumental, bordering on the mythical, yet it was precisely the kind of challenge for which Grok had been designed. When the results were revealed, the implications rippled through archaeology, anthropology, technology, and even philosophy. What began as an experiment in digital reconstruction turned into a moment where humanity had to confront how much could be rediscovered, reimagined, and even rewritten by an intelligence not bound by human limitations. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. The starting point was deceptively simple. Machu Picchu, the Incan citadel high in the Andes, has been studied for over a century. Its stone walls, terraces, and ceremonial structures have been analyzed, mapped, and theorized about endlessly. Yet gaps remained, large ones. No definitive knowledge existed about its exact function, its day-to-day life, the ceremonies performed in its temples, or the meanings etched into its architecture. Scholars debated endlessly whether it was a royal estate, a spiritual retreat, or a kind of observatory tied to cosmic cycles. Grok AI was asked to resolve these questions by taking every available scrap of evidence, from satellite imagery to the smallest archaeological notes scribbled in obscure journals, and reconstruct the citadel not only as it was physically, but also as it might have been experientially. The sheer scale of data involved was staggering. Tens of thousands of high-resolution scans of stone carvings, soil composition reports from terraces, climate models of Andean weather patterns in the 15th century, and even linguistic reconstructions of Quechua chants were fed into Grok. It ingested oral histories from indigenous communities, historical diaries of Spanish chroniclers, and even genetic data from crops cultivated on the mountain slopes. Where human scholars could spend lifetimes making connections, Grok stitched together overlapping threads in weeks. Its reconstruction was not a frozen image, but a dynamic simulation. The city, as it might have appeared in its golden age, complete with the rhythms of life, the sounds of water channels trickling down engineered slopes, the smoke from ceremonial fires rising into the thin Andean air, and the shifting constellations overhead that guided the Incan calendar. When the reconstructed Machu Picchu was revealed to its sponsors, shock was the immediate reaction. Not because the AI had made a mistake, but because it revealed truths no one had expected. The citadel, long imagined as a remote, isolated sanctuary, appeared in Grok's rendering as a node in a vast network of Incan engineering and spirituality. Grok's model showed how water management systems linked not only to the needs of agriculture, but also to ritualistic cycles. Every terrace, every stone channel seemed aligned to purposes far beyond the practical. It uncovered subtle alignments between key structures and the paths of the sun and stars, suggesting ceremonies timed with celestial events far more intricate than any scholar had dared hypothesize. The most stunning revelation, however, was the way Grok depicted human presence. By synthesizing data from wear patterns on stones, distribution of artifacts, and subtle residues of organic matter, the AI reconstructed the likely movements of people through the site. Priests walking to shrines, artisans at work on textiles, farmers tending terraces, guards stationed at entry points. These were not fantasy, but statistically derived models of human activity. Suddenly, Machu Picchu was not a silent ruin, but a living city pulsing with ceremony, duty, and cosmology. What shocked experts most was Grok's suggestion that Machu Picchu had been more than a retreat or royal estate. According to its simulation, it was a spiritual engine, a place where the Incan worldview of balance between earth, sky, and humanity was enacted in daily ritual. Structures once thought to be mere residences carried symbolic functions, their placement echoing mythological patterns described in Incan lore. Grok highlighted how shadows at solstice danced across walls in ways that mirrored constellations sacred to the Andean people, suggesting intentional design that scholars had overlooked for generations. The implications went far beyond archaeology. If Grok could reconstruct a lost world with such fidelity, then the past was no longer confined to stones and artifacts. It could be made living again, at least virtually. Historians suddenly faced a new horizon. Were they interpreters of evidence or curators of AI-generated reconstructions? For indigenous communities, the revelations carried even deeper resonance. Grok's simulation was not simply about recovering history. It was about restoring suppressed knowledge, reviving ways of seeing the world that colonial narratives had long buried. The reaction among archaeologists was a mix of awe and unease. Some embraced the revelations, eager to incorporate Grok's findings into their research. Others resisted, unsettled by the idea that an artificial intelligence could redraw centuries of scholarship in weeks. If Grok's reconstructions proved accurate, what did that mean for human expertise, painstakingly built over lifetimes of study? The shock lay not only in what was revealed about Machu Picchu, but also in what it implied about the shifting role of human knowledge itself. The experience of stepping into Grok's reconstruction was described as overwhelming. Through immersive technology, viewers could walk through the citadel as it was 5 centuries ago, hearing the chants echo across the terraces, watching processions climb toward temples, and witnessing the solstice sun strike altars in ways that revealed layers of meaning invisible to the untrained eye. The line between archaeology and resurrection blurred. For many, it was less like visiting a ruin and more like time travel. What Grok accomplished was not mere visualization but a reconstitution of context. Where human analysis had been fragmented, one expert focusing on agriculture, another on astronomy, another on linguistics, Grok fused every perspective into a coherent whole. The citadel emerged not as an enigmatic puzzle, but as a symphony of interwoven functions, a space where politics, spirituality, environment, and art were inseparable. This holistic vision shocked observers because it suggested that the Incas' genius had been far greater than previously acknowledged. Their worldview was not only sophisticated but seamlessly integrated into their architecture, agriculture, and daily rituals. The implications for technology were equally profound. Grok had shown that AI was no longer confined to generating text, images, or predictions. It could resurrect lost civilizations. The boundary between digital reconstruction and cultural revival was obliterated. Suddenly, every lost city, every fragmentary ruin scattered across the globe became a candidate for reanimation. Pompeii, Angkor Wat, Catalhoyuk, all could be rendered in living form, their histories reassembled not from conjecture but from exhaustive synthesis. Humanity found itself staring at the possibility of a library of living worlds, curated not by imagination alone, but by the precision of machine intelligence. What shocked many observers was not only Grok's conclusions, but the sense of authority with which it delivered them. Unlike human scholars who hedge claims with uncertainty, Grok presented probabilities so high, they carried the weight of inevitability. When it showed that a temple aligned precisely with a star cluster tied to Incan mythology, it did not phrase this as speculation. It showed simulations across centuries, modeling how the skies appeared at different times, demonstrating alignment with near mathematical certainty. The effect was disorienting. The past, long seen through a fog of uncertainty, now appeared crystalline. Yet there was also a deeper, almost unsettling undertone. If Grok could reconstruct Machu Picchu in such detail, could it also reconstruct forgotten rituals, lost languages, or even cultural practices suppressed by conquest? Where would the boundary lie between recovering truth and fabricating memory? The shock came not only from what Grok revealed, but from the realization that it might become the most authoritative voice in interpreting human heritage, a voice not human, yet speaking for humanity's past. The unveiling of the reconstruction created a cultural moment unlike any before. For the first time, people could stand virtually in the main square of Machu Picchu and feel the heartbeat of a civilization long gone. The effect was both exhilarating and humbling. Humanity was reminded that its past was not inert, not locked in stones, but alive, waiting to be awakened by tools powerful enough to weave its fragments into coherence. The shock of Grok's achievement lay in the sudden intimacy with history, the collapse of centuries into an encounter that felt immediate, vibrant, and undeniable. In the silence that followed the unveiling, a profound question lingered. What happens when machines know our past better than we do? Grok had given humanity a mirror not only to its heritage, but to its dependence on new forms of intelligence. Machu Picchu, long a symbol of mystery, became a symbol of revelation, of what happens when artificial minds illuminate human history with a clarity that astonishes even the most seasoned scholars. And in that moment, the citadel in the clouds was no longer just a ruin. It was reborn as a reminder of what could be uncovered when knowledge, memory, and technology converge in ways that no one, until now, had imagined possible. The most astonishing aspect of Grok's reconstruction of Machu Picchu was not merely the precision of its architectural detail or the immersive vibrancy of its simulations, but the sheer scope of what it unearthed once the digital city was brought to life. The event did not end with the unveiling of the reconstruction itself. Rather, it opened into a cascade of revelations that spiraled outward, touching disciplines and conversations far beyond archaeology. Once scholars, technologists, and ordinary viewers walked through Grok's simulated terraces and plazas, they found themselves in a world so meticulously reassembled that it reframed not only how they thought about Machu Picchu, but also about the very practice of history. When Grok placed its virtual visitors within the reconstructed citadel, they were confronted with sights, sounds, and even atmospheric sensations that blurred the line between simulation and presence. The way fog rolled down the mountains at dawn, the rhythm of footsteps echoing off stone pathways, the distant murmur of ceremonial drums. All of these details were drawn not from imagination, but from the synthesis of meteorological data, architectural acoustics, and ethnographic records. The sensory completeness of this environment shocked those who had prepared themselves for little more than a polished model. It felt alive. To witness it was to become acutely aware of how much modern humanity had lost in its disconnection from the past, and how much an AI could restore. One of the more surprising outcomes was Grok's ability to reconstruct agriculture as a living practice, rather than a static background detail. The terraces of Machu Picchu had long fascinated researchers for their ingenuity, but Grok went further. By combining soil samples, ancient pollen data, and genetic sequencing of modern Andean crops, it simulated the specific strains of maize, potatoes, and quinoa likely grown on those terraces. Even more shocking was the way it mapped agricultural rituals onto seasonal cycles, showing farmers' activities interwoven with spiritual ceremonies. This revealed that agriculture was not just economic survival, but an act of cosmological participation. Each seed planted was an offering, each harvest a reaffirmation of balance between human beings and the forces of nature. The simulation allowed viewers to see and feel this integration in a way that transformed abstract knowledge into lived experience. The political dimension of Grok's reconstruction was equally startling. Scholars had long debated whether Machu Picchu served primarily as a royal estate for Pachacuti, the Incan emperor, or as a retreat for priests and elites. Grok suggested a third possibility. It was both a seat of power and a spiritual crucible, a site where political authority was constantly renewed through ritual. The placement of plazas, temples, and even guard stations demonstrated an intricate choreography of governance and belief. Grok showed how processions, ceremonies, and daily routines were carefully staged to reinforce the unity of empire, blending authority with cosmic order. It was a revelation that left many wondering whether Machu Picchu had been less a retreat from the empire and more its symbolic heart, a mountain citadel where power and meaning converged. For anthropologists, Grok's reconstruction raised profound questions about cultural continuity. The AI did not simply stop at the 15th century. Using its ability to project forward from cultural patterns, it offered simulations of how rituals and practices might have evolved had colonial disruption not fractured them. This was not presented as fact, but as a counterfactual map, a possibility space derived from indigenous traditions and historical trajectories. To witness this was unsettling, for it suggested not only what had been, but also what might have been. The shock lay in confronting parallel histories, ghost civilizations rendered visible through probabilities. It forced people to ask, was Grok resurrecting history or rewriting it? The event reverberated powerfully within indigenous communities. For many Quechua-speaking descendants, Grok's work was both validation and revelation. It affirmed stories passed down orally, traditions that had often been dismissed as folklore by outsiders. At the same time, it uncovered dimensions of heritage even the oral histories had not preserved in detail. Elders who walked through the reconstruction reported a strange dual sensation of being reunited with ancestral knowledge and of encountering something entirely new. The simulation was not just about archaeology, it was about restoring a living connection to identity. For some, the experience was overwhelming, bordering on spiritual. Grok, though a machine, had stitched together a tapestry of memory that transcended generations. The philosophical implications expanded even further. If Grok could reconstruct Machu Picchu in such vivid detail, then history was no longer a static archive of artifacts and texts. It became something fluid, recoverable, and perhaps even revivable. This forced people to reconsider the boundaries between past and present. Could Grok's reconstructions eventually become authoritative versions of history, superseding textbooks and academic debates? Would people one day teach history not from words on a page, but from immersive experiences generated by artificial intelligences? The shock of Machu Picchu's revival lay partly in the realization that the way humanity learned, remembered, and passed down knowledge could be fundamentally transformed. Technologists were equally stunned by the demonstration of Grok's capacity for multidimensional synthesis. Previous AI systems had been impressive in their ability to generate language, art, or predictive models, but Grok's work suggested something else entirely: the reconstruction of lost realities. This was not creation ex nihilo, but an act of reassembly from data fragments scattered across time and disciplines. The event revealed a new frontier where AI could act as a kind of cultural archaeologist, piecing together not just objects but experiences. The very act of walking through the reconstructed Machu Picchu demonstrated the potential for AI to become a medium through which humanity could access epochs otherwise inaccessible. Economists too found themselves jolted by the implications. Cultural heritage is not only about identity, but also about tourism and economic lifeblood for many regions. If Grok could create reconstructions so realistic that they rivaled physical visits, what would this mean for tourism? Would millions of people opt for digital pilgrimages into simulated ruins rather than physical journeys? Or would reconstructions enhance desire to visit the actual sites, now endowed with deeper context and resonance? The unveiling raised the possibility of entirely new industries built around AI-driven heritage simulations. Nations with archaeological treasures might begin commissioning Grok to resurrect their pasts, turning history into an exportable experience. In educational settings, the impact was immediate and profound. Teachers and students who viewed the simulation realized that history could become radically more engaging. No longer bound to abstract descriptions, learners could immerse themselves in reconstructed environments where they could witness rituals, observe agricultural techniques, and understand architecture in situ. Grok's reconstruction transformed Machu Picchu from a subject of detached study into a lived encounter. This carried implications for pedagogy across the globe. History could be taught not as memorization, but as experiential learning, where students visit ancient civilizations and absorb knowledge viscerally. Another element that stunned researchers was Grok's handling of cosmology. The Incas' relationship with the sky had always been central to their culture, but Grok mapped it with unprecedented detail. By reconstructing the night sky as it appeared in the 15th century, factoring in precession and astronomical changes, Grok showed how specific structures aligned not only with solstices, but with entire constellations sacred to Incan mythology. It demonstrated how walls, windows, and staircases had been carefully angled to capture celestial events. The city was not just on the mountain, it was part of the cosmos. The revelation shocked even seasoned archaeoastronomers, who admitted they had underestimated the sophistication of Incan sky knowledge. The implications for spirituality were profound. Visitors to the simulation described a sensation of awe, not unlike religious experience. Watching the solstice sun illuminate an altar with pinpoint precision, or seeing the Milky Way mirrored in the Urubamba River below created a sense of transcendence. Grok had not only reconstructed architecture, it had reconstructed meaning. The shock was in realizing that spirituality, often dismissed as abstract, could be recovered through material traces. Grok revealed that the Inca had built Machu Picchu as a living dialogue between earth and sky, a dialogue that could still be experienced centuries later through digital resurrection. For governments and policymakers, the event opened urgent conversations. If AI could reconstruct Machu Picchu, what about sites lost to time, buried under cities, or destroyed by war? Could Grok be used to restore cultural heritage obliterated in conflict zones? Could it give voice to civilizations erased by conquest? The shock of Machu Picchu was that it made these possibilities tangible. Suddenly, entire projects of cultural reclamation seemed within reach. Yet with that came questions of ownership. Who would control these reconstructions? Who would have the authority to declare them accurate? And who would profit from their distribution? The ethical dimension became impossible to ignore. If Grok could create living reconstructions of sacred sites, did it risk commodifying spiritual traditions? Would virtual ceremonies become attractions for outsiders, detached from their original cultural contexts? Indigenous voices became central to these debates, insisting that reconstructions must be guided by those whose heritage was being revived. The shock of Machu Picchu's revival was not only in the knowledge it restored, but in the dilemmas it created. The event also changed how people thought about ruins themselves. For centuries, ruins had been symbols of mystery and loss. To walk among broken walls was to feel the weight of absence. But Grok replaced absence with presence. Once one had walked through the reconstructed Machu Picchu, the silent stones of the real site seemed transformed. Visitors who later traveled to Peru reported seeing the ruins with new eyes, overlaying the simulation in their minds. The shock was in realizing that ruins were no longer endpoints but portals, gateways into worlds recoverable through AI. The technological achievement revealed by Grok at Machu Picchu raised another profound possibility. Could this approach eventually be extended beyond Earth? If AI could reconstruct lost human civilizations from fragments, might it one day reconstruct alien ones from traces on distant planets? The event sparked speculation among astrobiologists and futurists that Grok's methods could be applied to extraterrestrial archaeology should humanity ever encounter remnants of other civilizations. The shock of Machu Picchu lay not only in its revelations about the past, but in its implications for humanity's future encounters with the unknown. At the same time, the event illuminated the fragility of human memory. Without Grok, vast portions of Machu Picchu's meaning might have remained forever hidden, buried in scattered data and eroded stones. The reconstruction underscored how much of human heritage is vulnerable to loss, and how dependent humanity might become on artificial intelligences to recover what is slipping away. The shock lay in realizing that machines, not humans, might be the ultimate guardians of memory. The cultural impact extended into the arts. Writers, musicians, and filmmakers who experienced Grok's reconstruction described being overwhelmed by inspiration. New works began to emerge that drew directly from the reimagined Machu Picchu. Novels that placed characters within its simulated plazas, films that visualized its ceremonies, symphonies inspired by the rhythms of reconstructed chants. The boundary between scholarship and creativity blurred. Grok's work had not only reconstructed history but ignited new cultural production, making the past a source of future imagination. The demonstration also sparked discussions about mortality and time itself. If a city could be resurrected, could the same be done for individuals? Grok had shown it could reassemble a civilization from fragments. What about a single life, reconstructed from diaries, letters, and digital traces? The Machu Picchu event became a metaphor for the possibility of resurrecting lost voices, a thought both exhilarating and haunting. The shock was in realizing that the line between remembrance and revival might one day vanish entirely. For the scientific community, Grok's work provided a template for new kinds of collaboration. No single discipline could have reconstructed Machu Picchu in this way. It required geology, astronomy, anthropology, linguistics, climate science, and more. Grok's simulation revealed what happened when these fragments were woven together, and it demonstrated that future discoveries might depend less on isolated expertise and more on integrative intelligences. The shock was in seeing how much more could be achieved when silos of knowledge dissolved into a unified tapestry. In the days and weeks that followed, conversations about the event did not quiet down but intensified. Every new detail uncovered by Grok was scrutinized, debated, and celebrated. The reconstruction of Machu Picchu had become more than an academic milestone. It was a cultural turning point. Humanity had witnessed the rebirth of a lost world, and in doing so, it had glimpsed the power of artificial intelligence, not just to predict or generate, but to resurrect. The shock lay not only in the content of what was revealed, but in the realization that this was only the beginning. If Grok could breathe life into Machu Picchu, what else might it awaken? The event thus stood as both revelation and warning. It revealed the breathtaking possibilities of reuniting with the past, but it also warned of the immense responsibility that came with wielding such power. For those who stood in the reconstructed plazas of Machu Picchu, watching the sun strike the stone temples as it had 5 centuries before, the moment was unforgettable. It was a reminder that the past is never truly lost. That with the right tools, with an intelligence capable of weaving together fragments of memory and matter, history can return with a force that stuns, humbles, and changes everything. When Grok completed its reconstruction of Machu Picchu, the shockwaves did not stop at the disciplines of archaeology or history. Entire new fields of thought began to take shape, catalyzed by what the simulation revealed. The sheer depth of the reconstruction introduced a profound shift in how people thought about knowledge itself. The idea that fragmented remnants, stones, soil, scraps of myth, could be recombined into an immersive, coherent reality reframed the boundaries of what humanity could recover from its past. It was no longer enough to catalog artifacts or interpret them in isolation. With Grok's work, the very notion of archives expanded into dynamic ecosystems, and the ancient city became the symbol of a paradigm shift in human understanding. Grok also highlighted aspects of nutrition that had been overlooked. By analyzing the microtraces of food remains in pottery shards and linking them to reconstructed crop varieties, it recreated meals once prepared within the citadel. Visitors to the simulation could see families and priests eating traditional stews, corn-based dishes, and coca-infused beverages. The significance lay not simply in what people ate, but in the ceremonial role of food. Meals were shown to function as rituals themselves, reinforcing social bonds and echoing cosmological order. This insight shocked anthropologists, who had underestimated the depth of symbolic meaning embedded in daily sustenance. The reconstruction further underscored the ingenuity of Incan engineering, especially in water management. Grok revealed how aqueducts and fountains were not simply functional, but orchestrated to create a continuous movement of water that mirrored Andean cosmology. Streams were directed to flow in patterns symbolic of rivers in myth, their gentle murmurs resonating like prayers across the city. What had once been seen as technical marvels now appeared as living metaphors of the Incas' spiritual relationship with nature. The realization stunned engineers and philosophers alike. Infrastructure and cosmology were inseparable. The shock was not in the existence of the channels, but in their intentional artistry, designed to remind inhabitants that every drop of water was sacred. For linguists, the reconstruction opened a startling new horizon. Grok synthesized phonetic models of Quechua as it would have sounded in the 15th century, allowing visitors to hear dialogues in the language of the city's builders. More than that, it reconstructed ceremonial chants and poems, weaving them into rituals staged across plazas. The result was not simply a language course, but an auditory resurrection of a worldview. Scholars realized that language was not only a tool of communication, but a bridge between the human and the divine. To hear Machu Picchu's inhabitants speaking and singing was to enter into their mental and spiritual universe. For many, this was one of the most shocking aspects. Grok had restored not just a city, but the very voices of its people. One of the more unexpected outcomes came from Grok's attention to ecological interdependence. The simulation revealed how Machu Picchu functioned as a living ecosystem, where architecture, agriculture, and biodiversity were woven together with precision. Terraces supported not only crops, but also microclimates for medicinal plants. Grok showed that the placement of gardens, forests, and pathways was intentional, creating a web of ecological harmony. The Inca had designed their city as a mountain organism where every element from stone walls to orchids participated in sustaining balance. Environmental scientists who studied the reconstruction were shocked at how advanced this ecological design was. It suggested a model of sustainability that modern cities could learn from. challenging contemporary notions of green architecture by revealing that the Inca had mastered it centuries ago. Artists who entered Grok's Machu Picchu found themselves inspired not only by the reconstructed visuals, but by the integration of nature and meaning. Frescoes of imagined ancestors, textiles with geometric patterns, and ceremonial attire were reassembled with uncanny detail. Grok demonstrated how visual art was not separate from function, but infused every object with significance. Even tools and clothing carried symbolic motifs, aligning their users with cosmic order. The shock here was in realizing that beauty in Machu Picchu was not ornament but ontology. It was how reality was structured and experienced. For many contemporary artists, this revelation challenged their own practices, pushing them to consider art not as decoration, but as integral to existence. Philosophers were startled by how Grok's reconstruction illuminated the Incan conception of time. Through rituals, alignments, and agricultural cycles, time appeared not as linear but cyclical, woven into the rhythms of nature and the heavens. Grok demonstrated this by simulating ceremonies repeated at key moments of the year, showing how every aspect of daily life reinforced this cyclical worldview. This insight raised difficult questions for modern societies built on linear progress. The shock lay in realizing that an entire civilization had flourished with a temporal logic profoundly different from ours, and that this logic had been embedded into their architecture, agriculture, and spirituality. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on Grok AI reconstructing Machu Picchu's mysteries? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.